Maybe it happened to you at night. The house was already silent. There was no one walking. And yet, for a second, you'd swear you heard that sound you knew so well. The legs, that soft noise down the hall, that little rhythm against the floor, that sound that was previously part of your routine, and that now, precisely because it had disappeared, stayed living inside you. There are people who try to ignore it. They say it was the wind, the wood, fatigue, habit, but deep down they feel something else. They feel like it wasn't just a memory. And if you're watching this video, you probably didn't get here by chance. Perhaps you have felt a strange presence since your dog left. Maybe sometimes you look at the door as if it's still going to appear. Maybe you still avoid looking at that corner where he slept because something inside you does not accept that that place is completely empty. This video is for you. Because today we're going to talk about those small, silent, deeply emotional signs that many people begin to notice after losing their dog. Signs that could indicate that that bond didn't end with death. And no, it's not about scaring you, nor about filling your head with exaggerated ideas. It is about something much more human than that. It's about understanding why sometimes saudade doesn't come alone. It is accompanied by moments that do not seem like a coincidence. Sensations that appear just when you need it most. Memories that come with a different force. And a certainty that is difficult to explain, as if he had been by your side again. Because losing a dog is not losing a habit. It's losing a presence that followed you around the house, that was waiting for you at the door, that he understood your mood without you saying a single word. And when a connection was so real in life, many people begin to wonder if it can really disappear completely. Maybe that's the question that brought you here. What if some absences don't go away, but instead learn to stay in another way? Stay until the end, because we are going to explore together everyday signs that could have a much deeper meaning than you imagine. Signs that can give you comfort. Signs that can help you understand what you are feeling. And above all, signs that may make you look at the silence of your house with different eyes. Because sometimes it's not imagination. Sometimes love leaves such a strong mark that not even death can erase it. And the most impressive thing is that many times everything starts with something almost imperceptible. A sound, a habit, a sensation. As if he, for a moment, had passed by there again. After a dog leaves, the house is not simply emptier. It remains different. It's not just the lack of movement. It's not just that you no longer hear their paws coming back and forth, nor that no one comes to greet you when you open the door. It's something more difficult to explain. It is as if the walls have kept their presence. Suddenly, you start to notice things that went unnoticed before. You look at the place where he slept, and you can't see it as just any space. You pass by that corner, and your body still hopes to find it there, lying down, watching you in silence, as it did so many times. Even when your mind knows he's gone, there's a part of you that still reacts as if he's still part of the scene. And that is not weakness. That's bond. Because when a dog shares so many days with you, he doesn't just occupy one place in the house. It occupies schedules, sounds, routes, gestures. It becomes part of the emotional breathing of the home. That is why the silence after his departure weighs so much. There are silences that rest, but not this one. This silence compares. It makes you notice what's missing. It reminds you that before there was a small life following you from the kitchen to the living room, from the living room to the bedroom, from the bedroom to the door, as if its only mission was to be close to you. And maybe that happened to you too, entering the house, and for a second, looking down with habit intact. As if you still have to watch where you step. As if he could still appear behind you without making a sound. They are everyday details, yes, but that is precisely why they move so much. Because they don't come from thought. They come from shared memory. A person once commented something very simple, but very strong. He said that after losing his dog, he continued to inadvertently leave a small free space next to the bed. Nobody asked him. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't a conscious decision. His body simply kept remembering that this was the place of someone he loved. And one night, while she was trying to sleep, she felt the same calm that she felt when he settled there, nearby, without asking for anything. He didn't see anything. He didn't hear anything clearly. But he cried, because at that moment, he didn't feel empty. He felt company. That happens to many people, although they hardly tell it. Because they fear that no one understands them. They fear being told that it's just habit, just grief, just imagination. But anyone who experienced a true connection with a dog knows that there are things that don't feel just in one way. They feel deep, real, unmistakable. And this point matters a lot. Grieving for a dog is not measured by how much time passes, but by how much love was left living in the spaces of every day. On the plate that no longer moves, at the door that no one scratches, on the sofa where the shape of his rest still seems to remain, at that time of day when he always appeared before. Because there are houses that, even in silence, continue waiting with you. If you ever felt that a corner of your house still holds something of him, write it in the comments with his name. Sometimes naming them is also a way to feel close to them. And maybe that's where it all begins. Not with a big sign, not with something impossible, but with something intimate, every day, like a house that has not yet learned to say goodbye. The hardest thing to understand about this topic is that when a dog feels close again, it almost never happens in a big or dramatic way. It doesn't usually happen with something obvious. Go with details, such everyday details that are precisely why they disarm you. Sometimes it is a faint sound at the most unlikely moment, an almost imperceptible scratch on the floor, a quick feeling of movement in the hallway when you know no one is there, or the sudden impulse to turn towards a specific place in the house as if something inside you had recognized a presence before your mind. And that's where many people doubt themselves, because they try to explain everything right away. They say it was fatigue, which was customary, that it was an idea going through grief. But there are moments that don't feel like a made-up thought. They feel like a brief encounter, like a silent closeness that appears and disappears before you can understand it. This happens a lot, for example, in routines that they previously shared. The time you arrived home, the time to go to sleep, that moment when you opened a bag in the kitchen and he always appeared, even if he was far away. Suddenly, you do the same thing as always, and your body reacts as if he had come again. Not because you are forcing it, but because there is something in the environment that awakens the same presence. And it doesn't just happen to you. Many people report that other animals in the house behave strangely after the departure of a beloved dog. A dog staring into an empty corner, a cat that stops near the place where he slept, a calm, attentive reaction, as if they perceived something that the human eye cannot fully see. It is not a definitive test, but it is a type of sign that touches something deep because it appears without anyone provoking it. There are also those subtle changes in the energy of a place. We don't talk about fear. We are talking about a sudden calm, a feeling of company right on a difficult day. To enter a room with a tight chest and leave there with a strange, almost familiar peace, as if, for a few seconds, someone had come to remind you that you are not alone. That connects with something important. Perhaps the return does not always happen physically. Maybe it happens perceptually, in the memory of the body, in the emotion that activates without warning, in that clear impression that he was close precisely when you needed him most. And maybe that happened to you at some point without you daring to say it. You heard something again. You felt a presence next to the bed. You looked at the door at the exact second he was waiting for you before. And although it didn't last long, there was something inside you that recognized it. Because when the link was true, sometimes the soul perceives before reason can explain. If you've ever had another animal in your home react as if he were still there, tell about it in the comments. Many people have experienced similar signs, and reading them helps us understand that we are not always imagining everything. But here comes the most difficult part. Recognizing a sign doesn't always bring immediate relief. Sometimes it brings conflict, because a part of you wants to embrace that moment, and another part is afraid to believe. And that's exactly where this story gets deeper. There is a part of grief that almost no one talks about. It's not just sadness, it's not just strange. It's that silent fight between what you felt and what you force yourself to deny. Because when you think you've noticed a signal from your dog, the heart reacts first. It tightens. He stops for a moment, recognizes something. But almost immediately the mind appears, trying to organize everything, turn it off, give it a logical name, leave it within a secure explanation. And then the conflict begins. But the other part, the one who lived with him, the one who knew his way of walking, his energy, his way of being without making noise, that part feels that it was not just anything. That crash hurts more than it seems, because you're not just facing absence, you are also facing the fear of believing in something that gives you hope. And many people stop there, not because they haven't felt something real, but because they fear getting excited. They fear that accepting a sign is a way of deceiving themselves. They fear they will suffer more later, as if opening the door to that possibility was too much for a heart that was already wounded. But there is something deeply human in that. When the bond was true, it is not difficult to let go just for love. It's hard to let go because your entire daily life was linked to that presence, to your way of waiting, his way of following you around the house, to that silent look that seemed to understand even what you never said out loud. That's why certain signs don't shake you just because they are mysterious. They shake you intimately. One person said that, on her last day with her dog, what marked her most was not the pain of goodbye. It was the way he looked at her before leaving. It wasn't a look of fear. It wasn't a lost look. It was a fixed gaze, calm, deep, as if he wanted to leave something said without words. After his departure, that person spent weeks reliving that moment. And one night, in the middle of a particularly difficult day, he felt again the same thing he had felt in front of that gaze. An unexpected, clean, enveloping calm. He didn't see anything. He didn't hear anything. But he knew exactly what his soul had remembered. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was an emotional presence so similar to him that for the first time he did not feel goodbye. He felt continuity. And therein lies the most delicate point of all this. Sometimes the sign doesn't come to convince your head. It comes to touch a memory that only love recognizes. That's why many people cry after those moments. Not because they are scared. They cry because something inside them loosens. Because even for a second, they stop feeling like everything ended suddenly. As if the distance between here and there became less harsh. As if the bond had found another way to continue breathing. What if what you find difficult to accept is not the sign, but the idea that a love like this can really remain close? That question changes everything, because it forces you to look squarely at something that you may have avoided. Not every connection is broken the moment a body leaves. There are links that leave marks too deep in the routine, in the memory, and in the heart to disappear without a trace. And no, that doesn't mean living trapped in the past. It means recognizing that there are experiences that do not completely fit into a cold explanation. Small, everyday, silent experiences, but loaded with an immense emotional truth. If you've ever felt a sign and then doubted yourself, write in the comments, "I felt it too." Sometimes reading others helps to let go of the guilt of having believed, because before bringing peace, many signs bring an internal battle. And the most surprising thing is that that battle usually appears just before everything starts to make sense. There is a point on this path when the question stops being, did something really happen? And it begins to become something much deeper. Why did I feel it right at that moment? Because when many people remember the signs they experienced after their dog left, they discover something that they had not noticed at first. These signs almost never appear at random. They don't arrive on any day. They are not felt at any moment. They usually appear when the heart is most fragile, when the saudade weighs more, when the house feels too quiet, when something inside you is about to break again. And that changes the way you look at everything. Because maybe it's not just about remembering your dog. Maybe it's because the bond they built was so deep, so constant, so full of real presence that it doesn't disappear suddenly. It can change shape, yes. It can stop being visible, but continue to exist on another level, in living memory, in perception, in the shared emotion that still responds when you need it most. There is something that many people feel, although it is difficult for them to explain it. Their dog was not just a company. It was an emotional refuge. It was that presence that came when you were down, even without understanding the words. He was the one who detected your sadness before everyone else, who lay close to you on difficult days, as if he knew that his simple closeness was already doing something important. And when a bond was like that, it doesn't seem so strange to think that their way of caring doesn't end in a simple way either. Maybe that's why some signs bring peace rather than surprise. Maybe that's why they're not always scary. Sometimes, on the contrary, they organize something inside. They make you breathe differently. They take you out of the weight of loss for a few seconds. And they leave a very specific feeling. It was here. Not like empty imagination, not as a desperate wish, but as an intimate experience that fits too well with the way he loved you. And perhaps this is the most important idea of the entire video. When a dog truly loved you, his absence may become invisible. But your bond doesn't necessarily end. That is a phrase that many people feel without having known how to put it into words. Because it explains something essential. Not everything true needs to remain visible to continue existing. Think about it in simple things. At the door where you still imagine him waiting, in the place where I slept, and that still feels different. In that rare moment when, for no clear reason, you felt calm in the midst of pain. None of that proves anything laboratory. But it touches on a very strong human truth. There are relationships that leave such a deep mark that they continue to act within us, and sometimes around us, around. That is not against reason. It only reminds us that lived love also leaves forms of presence that are not always measured, but are felt. If anything in this video made you think about your dog up to this point, write in the comments, "The bond continues." Not as an empty phrase, but as a way to honor what they shared. Because maybe the signal didn't come to confuse you. It came to remind you that that love was not small. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't just this everyday life that you saw. And when you understand that, a lot of pieces start to fall into place. The sounds, the sensations, the sudden peace, the company impression. Suddenly, everything stops seeming like a sum of coincidences, and it begins to feel like a silent message that only the prepared heart can recognize. And precisely there, an even deeper truth is born. When a person begins to put together everything they felt, they usually discover something that completely changes their way of experiencing grief. If your dog felt close again, it was not at any moment. It was on a difficult day. It was a heavy night. It was when the sadness was quieter, but deeper. It was when no one else could see what was happening inside you. And yet, something in the house seemed to approach you. That's not a minor detail. Because if there is something that many dogs did in life, it was to appear just when you needed them most. Without you calling them. Without them understanding your words. No explanations. They were just getting closer. They slept close. They followed you around the house. They looked at you in silence. And somehow they managed to tell you, "I'm here." That is why, for so many people, the signs after their departure have such deep meaning. They don't feel like random visits. They feel like continuity, as if that care had not ended, as if that way of accompanying you had found another way. There are those who feel that presence at the exact moment when they are about to break. Others perceive it when they go through a loss, a problem, a period of great loneliness. And in the middle of that moment, something small, almost invisible, appears. A familiar sensation, a sudden peace, an impulse to look towards the door, a closeness that cannot be proven, but nor completely denied. And perhaps therein lies one of the most comforting ideas on this topic. Your dog doesn't come back to scare you. It doesn't come back to confuse you. If he makes himself felt again, he seems to do so with the same intention with which he was with you in life, to accompany you. Accompany when you need it most. Accompany when the soul is left speechless. Accompany when the world remains the same for everyone. But inside, you are fighting a silent battle. That also helps to understand why some signals last so little. Because they don't always come to stay long. Sometimes they come just to touch your heart enough for you to remember something essential. The love that brought you together was not interrupted, only transformed. And when you look at it like that, even pain changes shape. There is still saudade, of course. There is still an absence. There are still days when the house weighs down. But along with that sadness, something else begins to grow. A feeling of meaning. The feeling that this story did not end empty. That there was something so pure in that bond that it still finds ways to surround you. There are loves so loyal that even after saying goodbye, they continue looking for a way to get to you. If you feel in your heart that your dog visited you during a difficult time, write in the comments, "He came back when I needed him most." Reading those stories unites people who are feeling the same thing in silence. Because perhaps the strongest signal is not a noise, nor a shadow, nor a movement. Perhaps the strongest sign is the moment when you understand that his presence always appeared to take care of you. And now you could be doing exactly the same thing. And when that idea really enters the heart, the end of the story stops feeling like an end. And then you go back to the beginning, to that sound, to that brief moment when you swore you heard his paws again around the house, to that small moment that seemed impossible, but that, after everything we went through together in this video, perhaps no longer feels the same, because maybe it wasn't just noise, maybe it wasn't just habit, maybe it was one of those subtle ways that love comes back to touch what pain had left open. After losing a dog, you learn something difficult. Absence doesn't always feel like emptiness. Sometimes it feels like a transformed presence, like a memory so alive that it continues to breathe in the usual places. At the door, where I was waiting for you. In the corner where he slept. In the hallway where you heard his footsteps so many times. And also in you, in the most intimate part of your heart, where certain ties do not cease to exist just because they can no longer be seen. That doesn't erase the saudade. It doesn't erase the silence of the house. It doesn't erase the pain of the last day. But it can give a deeper meaning to all of that. Because if he really was by your side again, even if it was just for a second, then his story with you didn't end at goodbye. It just changed shape. And perhaps that is the greatest hope of all. Understand that some dogs don't walk away completely. They just learn to stay differently, quieter, more subtle, more invisible, but no less real for those who truly loved them. If you have felt something similar, tell it in the comments with a simple phrase, "I know he was here." Sometimes sharing it doesn't just ease the heart, it also gives another person the peace of knowing they are not alone in what they felt. And before closing this video, keep this image, the house in silence, the still night, and suddenly, that faint sound that you knew better than anyone. Maybe it wasn't a farewell remembering. Maybe it was an eternal bond finding a way to touch you once more. Because when a dog loved you with that loyalty that only they know, they leave traces that do not disappear over time. And sometimes, when everything seems too quiet, those footprints sound again.